His philosophy on repair is that breaking anything is the first step into learning something.
Hey everyone, how are you today? Thanks for the intro there, Gabby. So this is the second part to what is a two-part series on failure mechanisms and PCs. Today we'll be talking about PC software. Now, in the previous session, it was a little bit more in depth into just hardware and the failure mechanisms in hardware. Today it will be a lot of software, and I have a machine I'll be sharing a screen with here, another Windows 10 machine. Then we'll go over some of the connectivity device drivers, clean installs, as well as some useful software that you may find very valuable throughout your Windows experience here. Now, again, if you have any questions during the presentation, I recommend you put them in chat so they're not forgotten. At the end, we'll cover them in detail. Otherwise, you're free to hold them up until the end, and then we can talk about them, and you'll be able to take off the mute from your mic and share it with us. Cool. So without further ado, let's dive right into it here. So failure mechanisms. Now, when we hear this phrase, a failure mechanism, what does it mean? That's always an important question to ask when we start to solve something. And at its simplest, what a failure mechanism is it's any process that leads to failure. So this process, it can be anything. It could be an event, it could be initiated by you or the environment or something else. The important thing here is that whatever this process is it usually puts the product in unfavorable conditions. Now, this is a lot easier when you're dealing with hardware because unfavorable conditions for hardware are pretty simple. You drop something that's shock, or you drop it in water, you get water damage. You electrocute it, you throw something at it, takes an impact. Those are all unfavorable conditions for hardware. Software, it's a bit more tricky. For software, we can see unfavorable conditions in terms of configuration, how that piece of software was configured from the get-go. Furthermore, it can just also be dependencies, because every piece of software depends on something else, especially in today's day and age. There's no such thing as somebody that develops something absolutely from scratch. Every piece of software that you're using today is a part of libraries that were developed before, which features libraries developed before it, so on and so forth. So, if there's ever an issue in those dependencies, then yeah, it'll affect your software experience. And finally, with regards to software, it's just the software system that your software is running on. So when I'm referring to software, I'm thinking of an application. Think very simply like an Office application or a web browser that runs on some kind of operating system. At the end of the day, your operating system is software too, right? They're both code. They're both at its lowest ends, ones and zeros. The operating system is just a lot more complex of a piece of software than your web browser or Microsoft Office Word. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what failure mechanisms are. And today, hopefully, we'll talk about how we can prevent some of these, in addition to how we can anticipate and react to them. Cool. So the first one I'm going to go into here is about Wi-Fi connectivity. Now, this is probably the most hardware-centric point we're going to get into today. But I'm pretty sure we're all aware of what Wi-Fi is. For most of us, it's just associated with the internet. But Wi-Fi, it's just a standard for wireless communication, and it's a way that we share data both with each other and with systems. So many things can connect to Wi-Fi. You can connect your phone, you can connect your laptop. These days, you can connect your fridge, some toasters and coffee machines. There are many things that can connect to Wi-Fi. Each of them we refer to as a node, and they communicate data through Wi-Fi, right? Now, it's not all magic. Wi-Fi, again, it's transmission over the air. So as with anything, right, that gets propagated and transmitted over the air, you can block it. With Wi-Fi, you can definitely block it. There are very easy ways to do so. One of them, of course, is with physical obstructions, and this is, well, full on concrete. Uh, there are also range limitations to Wi-Fi too, and this is usually dictated by the strength of the antenna that is broadcasting that Wi-Fi signal. So these are two main things that anybody that's designing a Wi-Fi network or that has issues with their Wi-Fi should always think about. Where am I right now with reference to the router or the wireless access point? Are there any physical obstructions in the way? Furthermore, how far am I from that? Because all of those pay or play an important part in your signal strength and in turn your overall experience on that wireless network. Now, the next point I want to make sure is pretty clear here, and it's about when you do have a wireless network, what is hosting it. Uh, in most cases, everyone has a modem box with their ISP. ISP stands for Internet Service Provider. So over here in Canada, Rogers, Bell, and that's mostly it. There are some few other ones out there, Tech Savvy and so on and so forth, that you might find. A few smaller ones. They're usually children of Bell, Rogers, or Telus. But yeah, at the end of the day, they give you a modem. And the purpose of that modem is to convert a signal that comes out of your wall, comes out of a round connector, comes out of coaxial, which is just hybrid coaxial coming from wherever their network is to your house. So it converts that signal into into something that your router can process, and in turn you get internet at home. There's a lot more complexities behind it, but in its simplest form, that's what your modem does. But it's not just that. It's not just a modem. A long time ago, maybe that was the case, but today uh, they do a lot of different things. Um, in fact, they do three things, and that's why people often refer to them as combo boxes in the IT industry. Um, a common modem that you get from your ISP today is a modem, of course. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's a router. And the purpose of a router is it just routes traffic. So it tells data, okay, this is where you should go. Either it goes to a machine on the same network or it goes to a machine off the network, off your local network through the internet, like if you're accessing a web page or right now if you're in the Zoom session. And the last thing that your combo box does here is it is a wireless access point. So it hosts a wireless network. It broadcasts a wireless network. So it has three jobs. Um, and as you can probably think of for something that has three jobs and for anything that multitasks, it sucks at it. Multitasking doesn't quite exist as much as people like to think it does. There's always a sacrifice. And in the case of combo boxes, it's usually in terms of everything. So your ISP combo box is usually a pretty bad router. It's also usually a pretty bad access point. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because a really cool recommendation that I always make to everyone is whenever you get a modem from your ISP, it's always best to just leave it in bridge mode, meaning it just operates as a modem. It does its one job. And then you yourself buy your own router. And there are many routers out there on the market, depending on what you're interested in, the range that you want to broadcast a wireless network. You could even buy your access points separate from your router, and that leads to a lot better of a network. We can talk about that near the end here, what that would look like. But yeah, yeah. So that's usually the downfall of these ISP combo boxes. They just do a lot of things, and they're not great at any one of them. So at the end of the day, if you want a really good Wi-Fi network, it's best that you get the correct hardware, which does the job it's intended to do. And finally, it's about mesh networks. So you guys have probably heard a lot about mesh networking. Um, Probably heard at least with Rogers. I don't know if Bell has something similar. Rogers has something called like pods. So you connect them into like power outlets in your home, and then they somehow magically increase your wireless signal. Um, Mesh networks are kind of cool in the sense that you have one device that broadcasts a wireless network. And if it can't broadcast the entire distance, like say you put in your basement and it can't broadcast all the way to your second floor, then you would put what's called another mesh node on the first floor. And what that node does is it connects to the first wireless network and then broadcasts it further, almost like a repeater. It just repeats the network, makes it louder. Um, so you have a lot of nodes in your house that are just broadcasting on the same network. Now, these are pretty cool because they can extend your network with very minimal effort on your part. You don't have to do any wiring. All you got to do is power these nodes. Um, the cost, of course, with them, there's always a cost behind these things, is throughput. Because when they operate, they have to both connect to the old network or your parent network, and they have to broadcast a signal for new devices to connect to it. So it's doing two things. It's both serving as a backhaul, meaning it's taking traffic for all the devices that are connected to it, and sending it back home, sending it back to the home node or home router, or whatever it is. And the second purpose is it's serving traffic to clients. So it does two things at once, and the sacrifice in that is throughput, because the antenna has to now spend time, or the processor on the module now has to spend time doing work for two different tasks. That is both managing the backhaul and managing client data. Yeah, so mesh networks, not always the greatest for your situation. They are great if you don't really care about throughput. So say if you're not streaming 4K video and very simple, you're just at home and you're just browsing the internet, then yeah, mesh network may be perfect for you. But if you're gaming or you're streaming video on Netflix, then connecting through or setting up a mesh network is probably not the greatest thing out there. To answer someone's question in chat about do you use a far from the router or mesh network, you would usually balance it out. You don't want to put a mesh node too far from your router. There is like depends on the hardware you get. There's different kinds of mesh nodes. It'll say actually with it what the recommended distance it is to position it from its parent node or from your router. That is something you should read into for your own device. We can talk a little bit more about that in detail near the end here. Now, what I'm going to get into here is a few things that we can do to help alleviate some of our internet troubles. In fact, I just have 3 commands here, and these 3 commands are used religiously in IT. That's because a lot of problems can be easily solved with these. When you connect to a wireless network and you're connected to the internet, you have a few things. First of all, you have an IP that uniquely identifies you, kind of like your name. You also have a DNS, and that is just the location of another machine, which has a catalog of a whole bunch of names for machines, and it binds them to this IP address, to a number, to a 4-octave number in the case of IPv4 or IPv6. Now, when you are connected to a wireless network or when you are given that IP and you're on that network, there might be issues. It depends on a whole bunch of things. But you may run into problems whereas in the network, but it says you don't have internet. That's a pretty common one too. Or you're connected to the network and it's got like a little icon that says, yep, you have internet, but you try to load up a page and you can't. You can't go to any website. So all of those things really suck, and most of them can be alleviated by just doing these 3 commands. These 3 commands are really simple. They can be done through a command line, and I'll showcase it to you here, very simple. So you have, on Windows 10, you have the command prompt. Oops, I think I just went back a slide. There we go. Cool, yeah, so on Windows 10, you have a command prompt. black box, you enter in commands in here. Um, a lot of what you do on your Windows system can be done through the command prompt. You also have a newer version of this CLI interface from Windows, and it's known as PowerShell. Let's open the normal one. Cool. So on the left, we have PowerShell. On the right, we have command prompt. Either or, they're both the same utility. We can enter in most of the same commands, and there are PowerShell commands you can enter in here, which won't be available in the command prompt. But for today, the 3 commands we're entering here are really simple. And you would just enter them in as exactly as I pasted them there. So you would put ipconfig /flush DNS. That. Hashed map that your computer has, which maps the IPs, which is just, again, just a string of numbers, to a particular domain, or verbs in this case. Whenever you go to a site like Google or Reddit or YouTube, all of those sites, they have an IP in the background. You just don't see it. That name, that domain name, is mapped to something in the background by what's called a domain naming service, a DNS server. Now, when you clear this, when you flush your DNS, you're basically refreshing all that, you're clearing all that cache data, you're telling your computer, okay, I want you to forget all of the mappings that you know, all of the name to IP mappings. The next time we make a request, we're gonna make a fresh request to get that. And this one's really cool because maybe you're on a site that changes their IP, but they did not propagate it out fully. In that case, when you go to that website like Google or YouTube.com, whatever it is, it doesn't load up correctly. So that's what FlushDNS can help with. The second one is release, and the third is renew. Now, I won't execute them on this machine because I have a remote session to it, so it'll kick me out of it. But I will talk about what they are. Release and renew. These are 2 commands which will help you release the current IP that you have and renew it from your router. So another purpose of your router does a lot of things. Besides routing traffic, is it also identifies and can assign devices an IP address. That's if it's running what's known as DHCP. And that's just a naming service. It just names devices on a network, and how it does so is it gives them a IP. It identifies them with an IP. Now, when you do /release, you're telling your computer, all right, forget the IP that this router has given me. We're just going to completely forget it. We're not going to associate ourselves with that anymore. And you do /renew, you're telling it, okay, I want a new name. I want a new IP. I want to be associated with something. So /renew will make a request to your router and say, hey, I want to be known. I want a name to me. I want to be identified on this network. And then it will give you an IP to do so. So the reason why these 2 commands are really cool is because there are sometimes issues with DHCP servers, and this is common in large campus-like environments. So think like a school or a campus, or maybe even in some public networks like a library. When you have so many clients on the same network and they're all asking this DHCP server, hey, can I have an IP address? Sometimes it may mess up and maybe it doesn't give you one, and that's very unlikely. But in most cases, what happens is you get a lease and it expires, but it doesn't refresh automatically. So by doing these 2 commands, you can get that to refresh, and then you'll get a new IP. Because at the end of the day, you lease an IP. You don't have that IP permanently if you're using DHCP. The whole premise of DHCP is every device that connects to a network just borrows that name. It's not given it permanently. It's given it for a set time period. And then once it's done, and if it's still on a network, it's given a new one, or it keeps its old one. And if it leaves the network, then that IP or that name now is released and can be reused by a new device that joins the network. To answer Catherine's question, yes, it's following ipconfig. So ipconfig is the command, and each of those flush DNS, release, and renew, they're all flags. So you just put it right after there. Okay, so I see we have another question. How do you check your internet speed? That's a really good question. I use two services. Let's see here. So one of them I use is fast.com, and this is a service from Netflix. And they have some pretty good servers, so it makes sense why it's accurate when you do run tests on here. Um, Another one is Google. Google can actually do speed tests in and of itself. Um, I know a while back that this wasn't the best tool, but I'm pretty sure Google has developed it a lot better now these days. Either or, really simple. We can go to fast.com. And I'm running this on a really slow machine here. But yeah, when you go to fast.com, it'll begin testing immediately, and you'll get to see your network speed. It'll show it to you in two things. It'll show you a download, and it will also show you an upload. The big number we're looking at right now is your download. Your download is mostly important if you're streaming content or if you're pulling content down from the internet. So yeah, streaming is the main one. If you're downloading files, of course, is another one. Your upload is another one that we'll see here shortly. And that is how fast that you can upload data to the internet. And that one's pretty important if you are hosting something or if you're uploading content. So maybe you're uploading a YouTube video, maybe you run some kind of game server on your local machine and you want your friends to connect to it. Either or, that's the use of upload here. You hit show more info and you'll see a little bit more details about this. While upload and download are really important, they're not the be all end all of your internet. In fact, there are more important metrics that you should keep track of. The most important, in my opinion, is latency, because latency shows you from where you are right now, what is the time it takes for that data to reach one location to another. And in this case, it shows you. So right now I'm in Brampton. It'll show you from where I am in Brampton to this location in Richmond Hill, the time it takes for a request to get to and from this location. Ideally, you want this to be as small as possible, because the smaller your latency, the better and more performant you are when it comes to requesting data, and not just that, but when it comes to loading pages, it's a lot more real time. Sure, it may take you a while to download things like pictures on a web page, but it will be a lot more performant. And if you're in gaming, this is what you really want to minimize. You want to get as little latency as possible. Because in gaming, you're not uploading or downloading big content like videos or files. You're uploading and downloading very small data. Like if you move in a game, it's very small information it shares, just character data from where you move from one location to another. But it does that a lot of times. It can do so hundreds of times per minute. So you want to make sure you get that latency as little as possible so you can share as much of that data as soon as possible. Okay, let's move on here. And we'll come to these to the rest of these networking questions near the end here. Just want to make sure we keep moving here. The next one I want to get into is drivers. And what are some good driver practices. So a driver at the end of the day is just a small piece of software that runs in your computer that tells your computer about the hardware device that's plugged in. So this hardware device can be anything. It can be a USB drive, it can be a CD drive, it can be a wireless NIC. There's no limit to what the hardware device can be. Even the CPU that's in that very machine, it can be that too. The driver just contains some instructions. It tells the operating system, in this case, Windows, hey, this is what I'm running. This is who I am, first of all. That's the most important thing. It tells the system, hey, this is what I am. This is my hardware ID. This is what I am. I'm a USB device. I'm a storage device. The next thing that it also tells the system here is this is what I can do. This is what I'm capable of. This is what I'm rated for. And this is usually metric data. So say if you have a wireless NIC or wireless adapter, and it connects to 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz networks, then it would tell your computer that. Now, when it comes to finding these drivers, as soon as you plug in a device in your computer is pretty smart. In fact, it will usually 9 times out of 10 just find the correct driver for it immediately. Windows knows a big catalog of drivers and it will download the best one for that device. In the event that it cannot, though, you should use and only use your official vendor sites. Don't just go Googling random drivers and then downloading and installing them. That is very dangerous. As I said in the beginning here, a driver is a piece of software that tells the system what that piece of hardware is and what it can do. Because it interacts with the system, it is very low level, meaning you install it on the system and it requires like administrative privileges just to install. And not just that, it embeds it into the system. It becomes a part of your system. So if you download a virus or if you download malware disguising itself as a driver and you install it on your system, you have just inadvertently installed a piece of virus or a malware into the root of what can be the most delicate part of your system. And it can be really tricky to remove and it can cause a lot of damage if you do that. So for that reason, if you're looking for a driver, only download it from your official vendor site. If you have an HP computer, go to HP's support. They have a download page specifically for drivers. If you're a Dell, go to Dell support. Whatever your computer is, just search it up, go to that support page and get your drivers from there and there only. The second point I want to make is about downloading drivers. Now, when do you need drivers is a really good question. And if you just got your computer fresh from, I don't know, Future Shop, Best Buy, maybe you order it off Amazon, the chances are having the correct drivers that you need are pretty reassured. Somebody took the time and effort to prep that machine before they sold it to you, so you don't really need to be too concerned. If you reinstalled Windows on a machine, then yeah, you could be missing drivers because you just completely wiped it. It doesn't know what the drivers are anymore. They're gone now. They went poof, they're gone. So where do we download these drivers from? Well, you download them from the vendor sites, but how do you know what drivers to download? And for that, you would use something called Device Manager. Now, Device Manager is a built-in tool in Windows. Go ahead and launch it here. And what Device Manager does is it shows you a list of all the hardware components connected to your PC. And from there, you can check out not just how they're performing, but you can configure few things about them as well as see the driver that they're running. So when this opens up here, I'll show you a few drivers for some stuff I have on this machine. Now, as you can see, this is the machine name, and we've got a whole bunch of different drivers classified into different categories. We open up processors, we'll see the processors I have on here. We open up monitors, we open up mice, we'll see all the different kinds of devices we have. If we want to view the associated driver with them, we just expand the field. So let's do something a little bit exciting here. Let's do network adapters. See the name of the device, go ahead, right click it, view properties, and this will show us a whole bunch of properties about that device. So from the general tab, we'll see if it's performing correctly. In advanced, this is where I told you can configure some information or some settings for this device. The driver tab will tell you more details about the particular driver. It'll tell you the driver is the provider, which in most cases should always be the provider for the piece of hardware that you have. It'll also show you the date that that driver was released. So at the end of the day, the driver is a piece of software. It was coded, built, released to the public. This is the date that happened. And of course, as with any release, it always has a version. So that's the version of that. You can view even more details if you hit driver details. From here, directly, you can hit update driver. You can also disable and uninstall a device which uninstalls the driver and it disconnects that device from your system. Now, update driver is pretty good if you run into a situation like this where got a device like, oh crap, this device was last, the driver for it was in 2015. Well, that's quite a long time ago. If you hit update driver, it'll go through Microsoft catalogs and see if it can find more up-to-date driver for this device. There are other things in here too, like details, and you can view different descriptors for this device. And this is pretty useful. I'll get back to why this is in a bit here. There's also the events tab. This will show you events for this piece of device. It'll show you know when it started, the kind of driver that it's using, the service, if there's any service associated with it. And then finally, not applicable to all, but you'll see like a power management. This will allow you to turn the power or turn off power to that device. In the case of this wireless card, I can allow the computer to turn off power to it to save power. So if the wireless card isn't consuming power, then my computer, if it's running on battery, will be able to run a lot longer, right? Pretty obvious stuff. Now, the third point in here for good driver practices is when you're looking for the driver for a device that you don't know. Now, this may sound a bit silly, like how can you have a device in your computer that you don't know when you're trying to find a driver for? And that comes up a lot more frequently than you think. In fact, if you open up your device manager on your computer right now, chances are you will see at least one unknown device through any one of these categories. Chances are pretty high you will see that. That unknown device doesn't mean that the computer doesn't know what the device is. It knows it. It has its hardware ID. The problem is it probably cannot find the software, the driver for it, through normal Windows catalogs. Now, this can be a bit tricky, right? Because if the computer can't find it through Windows catalogs, and if it cannot identify it, then how can you find a device? This is pretty common if you're in a laptop or you're using a laptop, right? And you're trying to find like the driver for the laptop SNCC and you don't know where it is. Well, damn, what do you do in that case, right? Well, in that case, you can use a website called Device Hunt. There are others like this too, but this is the one I use. And all Device Hunt does is it's a site where you would put in the hardware ID for a device and it will show you what that device is. So where do we get this info, right? Well, we can get it from here. We can get it from Device Manager. Let's take a look at the same Netgear NIC. Go to Properties. If we go to Details and we go to Hardware ID, we'll see a whole bunch of details telling us about this device. This is what we can use to search up and find what kind of device this is. So the first field here, VID, stands for vendor ID. We'll put 0846 in here. The next field, PID, stands for physical ID. It can also be known as a device ID, and we can put that in here too. And then we can hit search. The type in this case is just what the type is. So in the beginning here, it'll tell you the types of it. In our case, this is a USB device, so we'll put USB. Now, when we go ahead and search for it, look at that. It already found what our device is. This is our device. This is a Netgear dual band wireless SNCC, a USB wireless SNCC. So now with this information, now that we know what this is, we can search for the driver for the site either through Netgear, which is our vendor, or if this is an internal piece of hardware, then we can search through our computer's vendor site. So HP, Dell, whoever it is. So yeah, it's a really quick and easy way that you can identify missing drivers and unknown devices. How do you know if a USB device or if it's a PCI? That's a good question from Janet. And that is if it's a USB device. That's the easiest way I can tell, or you can describe it. This device I plug into a USB port, meaning it is a USB device. In most cases, if you are trying to find missing driver info for a device that is not plugged into USB, meaning it's an internal component to your computer, then it would be PCI. PCI is just an interface for internal components and connecting components to your motherboard. All right. Cool. So let's go on to the next slide here. All right, so I'll try to brush through this one here because I think we're nearing our time, hopefully. But let's see, we should have enough time to cover some of this stuff I have left. Um, Cleanly uninstalling sounds really simple, right? You have an application on your computer like Firefox or something, and you hate it to death. You want to get it off your computer as fast as you can. So what do, right? You go to program files or whatever it is. You can also just search up uninstall in your start menu, go to add in and remove programs, and then you'll go ahead and just select it from the list that will eventually populate here. And then you just hit remove, right? Or uninstall in this case. Really simple, right? Sounds really simple. There's a lot more behind it though that occurs in the system. And it may not always be that easy if you want to 100% remove a piece of software from your computer. When you go through here, when you go through apps and features or programs and features on versions of Windows older than Windows 10, um, and you uninstall an application, all it does is it removes that application. So the software for that application. Um, every application, of course, is software. It's all code. And you can find where that application is very easy if you use Task Manager. So if we launch Task Manager here and I want to find out where Firefox is, I go to the Processes tab. And if you don't see all this details, it's probably because you're viewing the very simple Task Manager. Hit more details, you'll get a lot more info. Find a process, in this case Firefox, right click. Because Firefox has multiple processes inside, we've got to expand it. Right click any one of these, open file location. And what this will do is it'll open up a file explorer on our computer to the exact location of that application where it's running. So this right here, where we are right now, all of these files, when we go ahead and we hit uninstall in apps and features, it will delete all this. It'll delete all those files. It'll delete this folder. However, that's all it will delete. Firefox, for a fact, stores a lot more data than that on your computer. Firefox stores what's called application data. Application data is not data that is built into the application. It's data that the application may create over time. Think logs, think configuration files. In the case of Firefox, your browser history, your recent downloads, any cached files, saved passwords, all of those are application data that is not saved with the application. It's saved in a separate location. Now, where that application data is stored differs per application. Most applications, they store data in your user profile, app data, roaming. You can access that very easy by typing %appdata%. I'll put that in chat here if anyone's interested to try it out on their computer. You can also browse to it normally if you go to your user profile. It's not here though, it's not visible by default, it's hidden. So you'll have to go to view, hidden items, and then you'll see app data. Then you go into app data, go into roaming, and then you're in the exact same location. Now, inside of roaming, you go into Mozilla, and then in the Firefox, and this is all the app data that it stores. So it stores info on our installs, going to my extensions, store. There's the third place that an application can store data is in what's known as your registry. And this one's a bit more delicate, and I will touch base on it very briefly, but it would require extra reading. And if anyone's interested, we could talk about it in more detail what the registry is. But on a Windows computer, a registry is a really simple store, almost like a database, where it keeps track of keys and values. Keys and values, think of it as a very simple X and Y table. All right, we got two columns. You got a column of X, a column of Y. Every entry in X has an associated value in Y. A registry is like that key value store, except it's a dictionary. And in the case of a dictionary, every key is associated with one and only one value. So we can take a look at what that looks like if you go to regedit. Same thing in your start menu. You go ahead and type regedit, opens up the registry editor. And in here, you're going to see a whole bunch of stuff correlating to all the different applications and even the system on your computer. Now, you're going to want to be really careful because changing something in here can really break your system. You would only go into here if you know what you're doing, or if you're reading something online that tells you, okay, this is how you fix a broken application, then sure, you would have a need to go in here. Either way, you don't want to be tampering or deleting stuff unless you 100% know what it is you're deleting or tampering with in here. So continuing with our example, we want to remove Firefox. We can easily go to File if we want to import and export. Honestly, you should export everything before you start modifying stuff in there, so you have a backup. These are all keys and values, meaning there's no pictures or video stored in here. It's all text and numbers, so it's usually pretty small in terms of everything. In our case, if we want to find something, we go to Edit, Find. Want to find Firefox. Go ahead and hit Find. This is going to take some time, but once it's done, we'll see exactly where it pulls up our process. So in this case, it looks like it's stored under, might take a bit of scrolling. There's a lot of entries in here. Hikey classes roots, scroll down applications, and then firefox.exe. Now this is just an extension. This only stores extension data for this process for firefox.exe. There's a lot more entries in here, and if you go ahead and hit Find Next, it'll find the next key, value, and location. So an application like Firefox, yeah, it can save data to your registry, and yes, it can save data in several different locations inside of your registry too. So this is pretty cool because this allows you to completely uninstall applications. Another thing that this is really common with, and you didn't hear it from me, but it's used a lot in the industry, and it's for resetting trials. So if you ever install a piece of software that's a trial version and you ever want to renew it, but you found out uninstalling it and reinstalling it, it somehow knows that it's expired. It's not magic. It actually saves that data on your computer after you've uninstalled. So that's where you'd go to your registry, try to find it, delete it from there. Same thing, you would go to your app data that I showed previously, try to find it in there and delete it there. And once it's completely removed, it cannot identify itself when you install it the second time around. Then you can renew the trial because it will think, yeah, this is the first time I'm being installed on this machine. Cool. Now as we near the end here, I'm gonna talk about a few of really useful pieces of software. These are in particular for diagnosing or investigating problems and issues on your computer. There's a whole bunch more, and I wish we had enough time to talk about all of them. But these are just a few off the top of my head here. CPU-Z and GPU-Z. Let's take a look at those two. Those two are pretty neat. Cool. So CPU-Z and GPU-Z are just two information utilities. Information meaning they don't do anything, they just show you data. In this case, they show you data on your processor, your CPU, and on your graphics card or graphics adapter, whatever it is in your system, in this case, your GPU. So when you open up each of these, they'll show you information about that device. So in this case, for your CPU, we'll see data about our CPU. We can view our current clock speed, how many cores there are, threads, caches on there. You can also view other data besides your CPU using CPU-Z, such as your memory, even some graphics data. This one's probably going to take a bit of time to load. GPU-Z is better for viewing graphics data. But yeah, this is really useful for you to take a look at all the different CPU stats for your computer. In this case, some of what you're looking at here may look a bit weird. Like, look at this guy. This GPU is VMware. Have you guys ever heard of a VMware GPU? Probably not. And that will get into our second topic here, which is virtualization. Now, virtualization, it allows you to run a machine or an operating system inside of another operating system. Sounds kind of crazy, but that's what's done a lot in the industry, especially in the cloud. When you have a machine in the cloud, or when you rent a machine in the cloud, it's not like a physical machine in some location. Imagine that if you had a physical machine in some location, for every machine that somebody rented in the cloud. That'd be crazy. So instead, what they do is they virtualize it. They virtualize it in a way in which every operating system runs inside of a little box called a VM. And you can create those little boxes with a piece of software known as Oracle VirtualBox. The third software here is VS Code. Again, VS Code, really cool. It's just a glorified text editor, but it's a lot more powerful than that, a lot more powerful than Notepad. You can even use it as an IDE, which is integrated development environment. And that means you can write code in here. You could even compile it in some cases using some of the extensions. And the community for Visual Studio Code is really, really great. Yeah, I see some people have already used it as an IDE. Yeah, it's really good for that purpose. And the last is security. Security software. Now, in today's day and age on Windows 10, the default security software or the security suite that comes into it is pretty useful and in most cases sufficient. If you feel the need for extra security, there are some options out there. I don't suggest getting a single option because a single option is setting yourself up for failure. You want to have redundancies. And in this case, for security, we have Malwarebytes, and I recommend the free version. Malwarebytes is really cool because it has what's called a really up-to-date virus definitions database, which is just a long list that says, okay, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. It says what it processes on your computer, if it's bad or good. That's what Malwarebytes is really good at doing. However, when it identifies something that's bad or good, how does it get rid of it? And in the case of Malwarebytes, it can get rid of some of those stuff. It can delete viruses and malware off your computer. But I find a piece of software like MCSoft does a lot better job at it. Furthermore, MCSoft has a real-time scanner, means it scans your computer in real time while you use it, unlike Malwarebytes free, where you have to manually trigger it. MCSoft, it's automatic, happens every time in the background, and it's pretty light. In my opinion, MCSoft is one of the lightest antivirus programs out there. It doesn't take a lot of system resources, doesn't lag your computer down to high heaven. It's really light in that respect. So that's why I find it good. The unfortunate thing is you do have to pay for MCSoft, but all in all, it's a really useful piece of software. So yeah, all of these here that I brought up here, didn't really have too much time to go over them in more detail. I do have the links for if you want to download them, where you can download them. So we can talk about that. I will have this PowerPoint shared with all of you, so you can check these out. And yep, that roughly covers it here for what I had planned in this session. We're a little tight on time, but if you do have any more questions, I highly recommend that you reach out to me. You can connect with your volunteer coordinators here, and they'll be able to forward any questions that you have after to me. Otherwise, you can also forward them to the Repair Cafe team. I've been a part of the Repair Cafe Toronto for around 4 years now, over 4 years, I think, maybe at this point. Damn, it's been a while. But we have a site, and we got a lot of other cool volunteers. These volunteers are people just like you and me, people in the community that like to do this sort of stuff and they want to give back. Check us out. We also have a Discord. Discord, for those that don't know what it is, it's an online community. Really useful. It has text and video chat, and we do hold these little Q&A sessions in there where we just drop in for a hot hour, and it's like, all right, go, toss all your questions about PC hardware, PC software. You got something that's broken, let's fix it in that hour. So we do that sometimes in there too. And of course, I also have a blog here where I post some of this cool stuff that I do, both related to software, hardware, whatever it is I feel like at that time. And that's around it. So yeah, thank you for your time, Mayor. This has been
Alvin, we do have until 8:30. Just
yep.
So you know. So it
yeah,
is.
Yeah, no worries. I know a lot of people have questions, so I've been hoping that we can dive right into them.
I'm going to. Okay. Oh, it is recording, but I guess I'm just kind of making sure. that I can't seem to pause the recording here. Can you please pause the recording? Nilakshi, can you still do that?
Yeah, Google's got its own built-in little speed test. Not the easiest thing to find. All you got to do is you got to go to Google, google.com, google.ca. And then directly from the search engine, it probably works directly from the URL bar if you're on Chrome. In Firefox, it's a bit different. But you can just go to Google here and you search up speed test, hit enter, and then it has this cool little utility here. It'll tell you about a speed test, what it is, what it does, and you can just hit run and it'll run it right here in your web browser. All right, so I hope that answers your question. Is it the same as the refresh option when you right-click your desktop? No, internet speed is very different than that. When you right-click your desktop and you hit refresh, you are just refreshing that folder. Your desktop at the end of the day is just a folder. Don't be distracted by the fact that there's icons and it's got a cool background to it. This is just a folder at the end of the day. If you want to know where that folder is, very simple. You open up a file explorer, go to this PC, local disk C, users, whatever your user profile is. And then in there, there'll be a folder called desktop. And here we'll have all of your files and folders that you see on your background on your desktop. So when you right click and you hit refresh, you're just refreshing that view. So maybe there's a file that you didn't see because you just saved it. Usually it's pretty instant, but if your computer's a bit slow and it doesn't update, hit refresh and you'll see it again. Let's see, another question here. Okay, this one was a bit back. Why does my one laptop lose Wi-Fi and all the other devices are fine? Yeah, I've answered a few of the reasons why that could be. Again, that could be because of physical obstructions. It could be because there is a fault with your hardware NIC or your network interface caught in your laptop. Maybe it is a driver issue. Who knows? It can be a plethora of things. You would have to experiment with that. The first thing I would suggest is make sure you first of all have the correct driver. You can check your vendor site to make sure you have the correct driver for that installed. If you do, then you can play around with range. Try being closer to your router, further away from your router. And if that doesn't work and it is still your laptop, then again, try another operating system on there. Try, and I mentioned this in the hardware session we did last time, but try putting something like Ubuntu on a USB drive and just booting into that. Again, doesn't affect anything on your computer. Just load up a new Ubuntu and connect to your wireless network and see if that works fine. And if it works fine, then you for sure know it's not the hardware because, well, the software works. A different piece of software works, so can't be that. All right. Let's see. The slash release is following, it's just a flag. There are many other flags for ipconfig if you're interested. Again, the command prompt is really powerful and ipconfig is a really powerful utility. You can Windows with it. Ever need help, just type plain ipconfig. You can also type ipconfig/help and it will show you a lot more details about the ipconfig utility, what it can do. Bavia, why do I use Firefox? Because I love open source software. I love knowing what I'm running on my computer. Running something like Edge or Chrome in most cases, even though Chrome uses Chromium engine. That's a conversation for a later day. But running software like that is almost like eating a burger and not knowing what's in it. It can be a bit scary sometimes, right? And then when it doesn't taste well, you can't really open up the burger if it's a web browser and see why it doesn't taste well. right? You're just forced to use it. So that I really hate. Firefox is completely open source, meaning all of the code for Firefox is out there on the internet. It's developed by people just like you and me and the Mozilla community, which is the parent organization. For Firefox, they're built out of some really, really cool people. There's some really awesome people in there that really love the internet and are passionate about making the internet a better place. Is latency the same as ping? Ping is a measure of latency. All right. That's like saying, is centimeters the same as distance? Centimeters is just a measure of distance. You can update driver software through Device Manager. Yes, you can. You can also do it through Windows Update. Do you need to reinstall drivers if you update your operating system? No, because updating your operating system only installs updates. It doesn't wipe anything off. Very rarely would it remove something from your computer. In most cases, it is adding stuff or it is fixing broken features. It will never really remove something from your computer. The exception is with, there's some real outliers and exceptions. A big one is Flash Player. For those that don't know it, by the way, Flash Player is deprecated, meaning that it's gone. It's no longer in development. And Microsoft last year, October, September, released an update that uninstalls Flash Player from your computer if you're still running it. You can manually install it back. It's not recommended though, because it's deprecated, meaning it's not developed. If somebody makes an exploit or a virus that infects Flash Player and does weird stuff with it, the Adobe community, which develops Flash Player, won't do anything about it. They won't fix it. They won't release a security patch, nothing, because it's unsupported now. It's deprecated. So yeah, they released an update to remove that. So that's kind of the exception, right? How do you know if it's a USB device or the other one? Again, I think I answered that question when you're viewing the hardware ID for that device. Here we go. Oops. I want to see hardware ID. There we go. In this little value field, it'll show at the beginning what that device is. In this case, again, because this is a USB wireless NIC, it's a USB device. Another example here, if you want something a little bit better, let's take a look at what's a bit more exciting. This one might be exciting. This is a hardware piece of hardware, a storage device. In this case, the hard disk drive on this machine, it's virtual, but it's still a hard disk drive to the operating system. So if we go into details, we go into hardware IDs, we'll see the hardware ID type. So in this case, the hardware ID type for this one is different. This is SCSI. That's just a hardware interface for storage. We can check out another one too. Let's take a look at something like mice and pointing device. Take a look at this PS/2 compatible mouse. Details, hardware IDs. This one's an ACPI device. So there's different kinds, there's different categories, depending on the interface and how that device is connected to your computer. For Bavia, what if I try to uninstall a device, but it displays a message saying that the program is currently running, but it's not on the taskbar? When you say device, I think you mean an application. When you try to uninstall an application, but it says that it's still running, it probably is still running. So what you got to do is you got to terminate that application. And a very easy way to do so is with Task Manager. I want to just minimize everything here. Cool. So Task Manager shows you all the running stuff on your computer right now. If you go to details, it'll show you it in a lot more detail in the name, what is running on your computer. That's because not everything running on your computer is a foreground application, meaning something like Firefox that I could interact with. In fact, the majority of what runs on your computer is background applications, or what we call services. In Linux, they're called daemons. They can be services. Some are even background processes. They can be a variety of things, but in the essence, there's a lot that runs in the background of your computer that you don't know. So if you try to uninstall a device, or in this case, you're trying to install a piece of software and it says it's running, chances are it probably still is. If you check this list and you see it's in here, then what you want to do is you just want to terminate it. In the case of Firefox, we know it's running right now, but say if we didn't, say we didn't see this orange icon here that says Firefox is running, we went to this list and we saw, oh snap, it's running here. What do we do? Well, go ahead and hit End Task. That will terminate Firefox. As you can see, it's gone from this list and the icon's no longer displayed at the bottom of my taskbar. Cool, let's see the next one here. Can you go over again what we're supposed to do if we're in a big place like school or a campus and want faster Wi-Fi? That one is a bit tricky because if you want faster Wi-Fi at a school or a campus, it's not up to you. It's up to your school or campus because they're the ones that have created and architected, designed, and eventually deployed that wireless network that you're connecting to. So they would be the one hosting it and would be able to improve the speed of it. In most cases, what they would have to do is they would have to use better access points. Better access points that have a higher throughput, or the source just needs to have a higher throughput, meaning it can download and upload just more data per second here. What you can do, very limited, as a client on the network that you don't control. In the case of your school or campus network, you don't really control that. What you can do is you can get closer to an access point. In the case of a school or campus network, it's usually pretty visible where they are. They're like square or circle boxes either on the ceiling or on the wall. Those are access points. You can even ask your professor. They'll usually tell you, or some of them have names on them. You can search it up. Like if you see something like Netgear, Ubiquiti, TP-Link, Cisco, those are all network hardware access points. So if you find one of those, well, yeah, that's how you know it's an access point. And getting closer to it is one way. Another way, of course, is if you're in a public area, is just connect to an access point that has little traffic, meaning not that many people connected to it. That one's a lot more tricky because how do you know who's connected to that access point? Unless if you're managing that network, you don't know as a client, right? So what you can do is you can go to another area or another location on school or campus that doesn't have that many people there. And if you see an access point, then chances are your device is most likely connected to whatever's nearest to you. I see another question here. Can you clear the CPU cache? No, you cannot clear the CPU cache. Your CPU dictates how it clears that cache. It manages that cache. That cache is for instructions. So it's not for you or me to manage like what kind of software is running there. The CPU manages the instructions that go into that cache. Let's see. Yeah, we do have it until 8:30, and I am free to stick around for as many questions as you guys have. What is a graphics card? A graphics card, that's a good question. A graphics card is a piece of hardware that is made for processing graphics, video, images. That's what it's made to do. Because processing those is really expensive. It is not cheap to process an image. It's not cheap to pull up an image on your computer or to pull up a video. It's very expensive, in fact, computational wise, it's very expensive. Because think about it, right? Like if I pull up, I don't think I have any sample pictures. Do I have any on this? No, I don't. Oh, that sucks. Sure, let's pull up a picture on Firefox. Any picture, right, that you see on your screen, even it's in an app, if you view it on your screen, it's rendered by your computer. And that takes time and effort because a picture is very complex. It's composed of a whole lot of pixels, and every pixel is color data. Like a pixel can be red, green, blue. Usually it's a combination of those things, and that's what creates a picture. So yeah, they can be really, really complex. In the case of, let's look at flowers, for instance. A flower is a really heavy picture, right? There's a lot of really nice, vivid colors in this that need to be generated. So when you pull it up, it's expensive for your computer to process and generate that. A graphics card excels at doing that kind of work. That's what it's made to do. Your CPU, in the case of this computer doesn't have a dedicated graphics card. The CPU processes the graphics and it does its normal work. What that means, again, coming back to the whole iteration of multitasking, is that it can do both, but now it's not great at doing either or. Because now it doesn't have enough time to spend processing application workload, because now it's spending time rendering this flower picture. And it cannot render, like, I don't know, 6 of these flower pictures because it's processing workload in the background. So when you just have your CPU doing all that, it can be really taxing. And in fact, your experience can suck a lot if you're doing stuff such as streaming 4K video, or if you're playing high-end games on a laptop that doesn't have a dedicated graphics card. Now, dedicated graphics cards from like AMD or NVIDIA, those excel at doing that workload. So your computer will offload things such as rendering this flower to that graphics card, and your graphics card will take care of that, meaning your CPU in turn has more time to do what it's meant to do, which is process application workloads. So your computer will run better on that front. Plus, since you have a graphics card, it can process and render graphics like these pictures and the games and the videos that you watch. So those will render a lot better, and overall your system will perform better because you have 2 pieces of hardware that do 2 different things. The workload is separate and delegated equally now. Let's see, another question here. Is the IP config / flush DNS the same as the refresh option when you right click the desktop? No. Again, I hope I answered that question already. When you refresh your desktop, you're just refreshing the folders and files on your desktop. Your desktop is just the location where files and folders can be stored, right? So you right click your desktop. If you hit refresh, it just refreshes what's in that folder. Again, you can view what's in there, see users, desktop, and any files and folders you have on your desktop, they'll be in here. So when you hit refresh, you just refresh this folder. That's all. It doesn't have anything to do with your internet. Oh, some of these are repetitions. Okay. I think somebody just pulled them from the top and put them down here. So I think we've answered a lot of those in that case. What does the up arrow next to the sound icon display? Oh, that's a good question. So at the bottom here, bottom right of your computer, these are just all system tray icons. You call them system tray because they're in the bottom in the taskbar. These usually correlate to applications or system processes that you'd want to change or want to watch data for on the fly. A really important one is volume and audio. So you can control your audio here. You can also see which network you're connected to by hitting the network icon. Hitting the arrow will show you everything else that's running there in the system tray. So the only reason the arrow exists here is because if you put all of these here, and we can do it right now if you want, right? Like just click and drag them down here. If you put all of these here, look at that now. It's kind of ugly. You got a whole bunch of icons here. Imagine if you got 20 or so of them, it would like end where my mouse is. It can be pretty ugly at that point and take up a lot of space. So the purpose of that arrow is to just, it collapses them all into one area. And then you can choose which important ones you want here and then leave the unimportant ones in that little collapsible area. Can I recommend a link or user-friendly language resource? Yeah, I can share something at the end of this presentation to you, Leah, and you can share it with the rest of the people in this webinar here that will go through some of these terminologies that I used today. Either or, a lot of these you can search up on Google and they'll have some pretty good explanations. Some of them will be better than what I can tell you right now. So they're pretty elaborate. Let's see, another one here from City. I recently factory reset my PC, and I would get some errors when I try to download things. Do you know what could be some of the problems? You're gonna have to share a little bit more details than that, City. I I don't know what kind of errors you're getting. Is it like an error code? Is it um, where do you see it? Is it when you're in a browser and you download a file? I don't know. I need some more info than that. Um, Either or, and this doesn't just go for City, but everyone else here. If you have questions like these, which are more requesting support, join our Discord and post them in there, because our Discord is like around 200 or so people strong, more than that at this point, of people just like myself. And they're not just in Canada, they're around the world. We got people in Sweden, Denmark, Australia, India, that love repairing stuff and love fixing stuff. And they got a lot of info that they want to share with the rest of the world. So community is a pretty cool place. And if you have any of those questions, drop in there, share them with us, and somebody will be able to help you. If I'm not there, somebody else will be able to help. I'm usually pretty active on Discord there, so I'll see and I'll get back to you. Um, for CAD, how far of a distance is meshing? What is the max distance? Again, I can't answer this one. This one will depend on your device. So every mesh node or mesh router that you buy, it'll have with it its maximum rated range. And that's just a calculation that the vendor does based on the power of the antenna inside of the device. So you would have to check the device, read its documentation, see what it's rated for. I can't answer that because every device is different. A lot of them, they boast some pretty great feats, but if I had to say reliably connected to a mesh device, you can probably go between 20 to 50 feet. And that's with a lot of the residential devices that you would buy, like the ones you'd buy at Future Shop or Best Buy. There are commercial, like industrial grade mesh devices, and those are a lot better. But just for your day-to-day purposes, yeah, 20 to 50 feet is probably a safe distance. For Janet, I forgot what you say. They were supposed to do if the Wi-Fi is connected, but the internet isn't working. Here we go. I have a slide on that here. Just 3 commands that you can execute. Again, ipconfig flush DNS. Just clears your DNS cache. Again, DNS means domain naming server, and this just keeps a whole list of IP to names. So again, everything like Google is associated with an IP. Your computer keeps a track of those. Sometimes something like Google changes their IP. Now your computer doesn't know what that is. In most cases, it refreshes automatically. Sometimes it doesn't though. And in that case, you can use flush DNS, and your computer will request a new IP the next time you go to Google. And then release and renew. This is for the network you're connected to. So release just completely disregards what you're known as on the network. In this case, completely disregards the IP. Renew asks your router, hey, I want a new IP or I want a new identity on this network. From where is it? Yeah, S Venusia. How can we fix or increase volume on the computer? My computer sound used to be high, but now it's a bit lower than usual. That is a good question. So you can use just this volume thing at the bottom here. Really simple, the volume tray icon. You can also check out the volume mixer. If you right click that icon, hit open volume mixer. This will show you every application that's running right now that has an audio output and the current volume level of that. You can actually adjust for every application that runs the output of that volume. So in the case, we have Firefox running right now, right? Say if I was playing a video in Firefox and I want it to be lower than everything else on my computer, I can just drop this bar and it will change it independently just for that application. So when you say that your computer sound used to be high, but now it's a bit lower than usual, maybe whatever application you're listening to, you lowered it in here by accident a while back. So you can adjust that here. If that is not the case, then you can boost it. If you right click, open sound settings, This will take you to a settings page. Let's wait for that to load here. Cool. It'll open up the sound page in your settings app. Want to manage sound devices. We can choose what our input or output device. Input is something like a microphone, which is collecting audio from its surroundings or from your environment into your computer. Outputs your speakers. Then here we can test. We can also disable them. If you search up sound in your start menu, you will get sound settings and system settings. That will bring you there. You'll also get the sound mixer, which is what I pulled up there. Manage sound devices. This will allow us again to see these different devices here. So explore those utilities there and see if you can find something that maybe was misconfigured in the past by accident for why your audio is really low on your computer. And it's really unlikely, but some computers have like a physical switch. This is really old. I'm talking like really old, like back in XP days. People thought it was cool to have like a sliding switch on their computers to adjust their audio. That was the thing back then. So if your computer is really old, it might have that, like a little radio or a little potentiometer, like a little dial almost. You can adjust your volume on your computer or on your laptop. So you might want to check that just in case. Answer your question, Bavia, yes. There's no S, by the way. Sorry, let me correct it. There's no S in there. It's not IPs. It's just IP config. So I'll re-enter it in here if you're interested. There we go. Oh, I might have just sent that to Gabby only. One sec, hold up. There we go. Cool. And again, this entire slideshow will be shared with you. So everyone that's attended here, you'll have this. And you can ask any more questions that you have in our Discord server.
Okay, thank you so much, Alvin. You can actually stop the recording now, Lakshi. Thank you.